12 most hated figures in Hollywood Golden Age history. These weren't just difficult personalities or demanding perfectionists. These were individuals whose cruelty, bigotry, and abuse left lasting scars on everyone who worked with them. The kind of people who destroyed careers with a single phone call, who wielded their power like a weapon, and whose behavior was so notorious that even Hollywood's publicity machine couldn't completely cover it up. During Hollywood's Golden Age, the studio system gave certain figures almost godlike power. Directors, producers, and stars operated with virtually no oversight, and many used that power to terrorize those around them. What colleagues whispered about in private has now become part of Hollywood history. Drop a comment and tell us if you think we ranked them correctly. Starting with number 12. Number 12. Otto Preminger. Austrian-born director Otto Preminger brought European sensibility to Hollywood films. But behind the camera, he brought something else entirely. A volcanic temper that made actors dread working with him. His films like Laura in 1944, Anatomy of a Murder in 1959, and Exodus in 1960 were critically acclaimed, but the sets where they were filmed were battlegrounds. Preminger's method was simple. Scream at actors publicly until they broke down. Music. His treatment of Jean Saberg on St. John in 1957 became legendary for all the wrong reasons. The 17-year-old actress was forced to perform multiple takes of the burning at stake scene, pushing her to physical and emotional limits. What made Preminger particularly insidious was that some actors actually defended him. Frank Sinatra respected what he called Preminger's directness. Music, but directness is one thing. Terrorizing a teenage girl is another. The abuse Seaborg suffered under Preminger contributed to mental health struggles that would plague her for the rest of her life. Preminger died in 1986 at age 80 from Alzheimer's disease and lung cancer. While some continued to defend him as merely demanding, his treatment of young actresses crossed lines that were clear even by the standards of his era. Number 11. Hopper. Hopper started as a failed actress, which perhaps explains the venom she later directed at successful ones. In 1938, she became a gossip columnist. And suddenly, the woman who couldn't make it on screen wielded more power than most stars. Her weapon wasn't a camera. It was a typewriter. Hopper competed viciously with rival columnist Luella Parsons. But what set her apart was her willingness to destroy careers not for scandal, but for ideology. During the McCarthy era, she led blacklist campaigns with zealous enthusiasm, targeting anyone she suspected of communist music sympathies. Charlie Chaplin became her particular obsession, and her relentless attacks contributed to his eventual exile from America. She used her column to enforce her conservative political views, and anyone who crossed her found their names smeared in newspapers nationwide. Her famous collection of hats became as recognizable as her poison pen. What made Hopper particularly dangerous was that she didn't need proof. An accusation in her column was enough to end careers. She ruined more lives from her desk than most studio heads could from their offices. Hopper died in 1966 at age 75 from pneumonia, but the damage she inflicted outlived her by decades. Number 10. Victor Fleming. Victor Fleming directed two of the most beloved films in cinema history, Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz, both released in 1939. Generations have grown up treasuring these classics. What they didn't know was that behind the magic was a man who terrorized his cast to get the performances he wanted. Fleming's approach to directing was brutally simple. He believed fear and pain produced authenticity. During The Wizard of Oz, he slapped Judy Garland to provoke genuine tears for emotional scenes. He called her cruel names deliberately designed to break her down psychologically. His treatment of women on set was particularly vicious, and several cast members complained to the studio about his behavior. The studio's response: nothing. Fleming's films made money, and that was all that mattered. His directing philosophy held that intimidation was a legitimate tool. What he created on screen was magical. What he created on set was traumatic. Fleming died in 1949 at age 59 from a heart attack. His classics remain beloved, but the cast members who created that magic carried the scars of his abuse for the rest of their lives. Number 9. Louis B. Mayer. Louis B. Mayer co-founded MGM in 1924 and ran it until 1951, creating what he proudly called more stars than there are in heaven. What he didn't advertise was how he controlled those stars like property, crushing anyone who dared challenge his authority. Mayer's genius was in understanding that power came not just from money, but from control. He inserted morality clauses into contracts that gave him authority over every aspect of stars' lives. He was famous for crying on demand, using tears to manipulate actors into signing unfavorable contracts. Those who tried to leave MGM found themselves blacklisted. Those who defied him watched as he orchestrated public scandals to destroy their careers. His treatment of Judy Garland was particularly sinister. He forced her onto diet pills and maintained brutal schedules that damaged her health permanently. He allegedly assaulted Charlie Chaplin at a party, and the only consequence was that people whispered about it quietly. Mayer viewed actors as assets to be managed, not human beings with rights. He would protect studio interests over talent welfare without hesitation. The most disturbing aspect of Mayer's reign was how systematic it was. This wasn't anger or temperament. It was a calculated system of control and exploitation. He died in 1957 at age 73 from leukemia, leaving behind an empire built on broken contracts and destroyed lives. Number 8. Erich von Stroheim. Austrian director Erich von Stroheim brought European artistry to Hollywood, but he also brought something far darker, a perfectionism that crossed into sadism. On his sets, the line between dedication and abuse didn't just blur, it disappeared entirely. Von Stroheim directed silent films, including Greed, in 1924, famously shooting a 9-hour original cut. But his pursuit of realism came at a terrible cost. He forced actors into genuinely dangerous situations, believing authentic peril produced authentic performances. On The Merry Widow in 1925, actress Mae Murray suffered real physical harm from his demands. He would shoot scenes hundreds of times, continuing long after actors collapsed from exhaustion. His sets were known as places where accidents happened with suspicious frequency. Actresses particularly dreaded working with him, whispering warnings to each other about what to expect. Von Stroheim spent exorbitant amounts of studio money on obsessive details that viewers would never notice, but his real excess was in how he treated human beings. Studios eventually refused to hire him after the disaster of Queen Kelly in 1929. His reputation for cruelty ended his directing career long before his death. He died in 1957 at age 71 from prostate cancer. His films are still studied in film schools for their artistry. His methods are now considered criminal. Number 7. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn was everything Hollywood wanted in a leading man. Handsome, charming, athletic, and utterly magnetic on screen. In films like The Adventures of Robin Hood in 1938 and Captain Blood in 1935, he played swashbuckling heroes who saved the day. Off-screen, he was something else entirely. In 1942, Flynn was tried for statutory rape involving 2 separate teenage girls. The trial was sensational, splashed across newspapers nationwide. He was ultimately acquitted, but the evidence presented painted a damning picture of a man who deliberately pursued underage girls. His yacht was notorious in Hollywood circles for parties that involved very young women. The phrase "and like Flynn" originated from his reputation for sexual conquest, though what many celebrated as charm was actually predatory behavior. Multiple accounts from women described Flynn as someone who used his fame and power to manipulate young girls. The studio had covered up numerous incidents before the trial made suppression impossible. Even after his close call with prison, Flynn continued his lifestyle of drinking, partying, and pursuing increasingly younger women. His autobiography admitted to numerous affairs, though it conveniently omitted the worst details. Coworkers described him as charming in public and morally bankrupt in private. Fly died in 1959 at age 50 from a heart attack related to years of alcoholism and drug abuse. His films remain popular classics, but modern audiences are increasingly uncomfortable celebrating a man whose behavior toward young women was predatory and criminal. Number 6. Harry Kahn. Harry Kahn founded Colia Pictures and ran it from 1924 until his death in 1958. In that time, he built a reputation as the most feared man in Hollywood. His office displayed a riding crop prominently, not as decoration, but as intimidation. Everyone who entered understood the message. Khan's casting couch was infamous throughout Hollywood. Actresses knew that getting a role at Columbia often required submitting to his sexual demands. He didn't hide this practice. Music, he flaunted it. He fired employees in brutal public ways, specifically to terrorize others into compliance. He bugged offices and dressing rooms to spy on his employees, creating an atmosphere of constant surveillance and paranoia. His treatment of Rita Worth exemplified his need for absolute control. He forced her into roles she didn't want, controlled every aspect of her appearance, and attempted to control her marriages. He would screen films while watching audience reactions specifically to actresses' bodies, referring to the women in dehumanizing terms. Even other studio heads, men not known for their sensitivity, found Khan excessive in his cruelty. The stories that emerged from Columbia in the 1940s and 50s are among Hollywood's darkest. Music. What made Khan particularly hated was that he seemed to enjoy the fear he created. He didn't just want compliance, he wanted submission. Red Skeleton famously joked at his funeral, "Give the people what they want, and they'll come out for it." The crowd that attended Khan's funeral in 1958 was huge. Most came to make sure he was really dead. He died at age 66 from a heart attack, and Hollywood collectively exhaled. Number 5. Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford was Hollywood royalty, a major star from the 1920s through the 1960s. She won an Oscar for Mildred Pierce in 1945 and represented everything glamorous about the Golden Age. Behind closed doors, she was something else entirely. America didn't learn the truth until her daughter Christina published Mommy Dearest in 1978, a year after Crawford's death. The book revealed decades of horrific abuse. Crawford beat her adopted children with wire hangers over minor infractions. Her obsession with cleanliness reached pathological levels, and she would wake children in the middle of the night to punish them for imagined violations of her rules. Christina described choking, night raids, and psychological torture that lasted throughout her childhood. The book's most famous scene, the wire hanger incident, was just one example of Crawford's violent outbursts. On film sets, Crawford's behavior was less physically violent, but equally toxic. She was notoriously difficult and demanding with coworkers. Her feud with Bette Davis lasted decades and became Hollywood legend. Multiple accounts from people who worked with her described narcissistic behavior and an inability to see anyone else as fully human. Her adopted children weren't loved family members. They were props for her public image, then discarded when they no longer served that purpose. When Crawford died in 1977 at age 69 from a heart attack, she cut 2 of her 4 adopted children completely out of her will. The publication of Mommy Dearest the following year transformed her legacy overnight. The book and subsequent film overshadowed her considerable film achievements, revealing the horror that existed behind Hollywood glamour. Number 4. Alfred Hitchcock. Alfred Hitchcock was the master of suspense, a brilliant director whose films like Psycho in 1960, Vertigo in 1958, and The Birds in 1963 revolutionized cinema. But his genius came with a dark obsession with his blonde leading ladies that crossed from professional admiration into harassment, abuse, and career destruction. His treatment of Tipahedron on The Birds was particularly abusive. During the famous attic attack scene, Hitchcock insisted on using real birds instead of mechanical ones as originally planned. Hayden was physically injured by the birds, yet Hitchcock kept filming. Off-camera, he made sexual advances that she rejected. His response to her refusal was methodical revenge. He made her life on set miserable and then systematically destroyed her career. When Hayden rejected his demands again on Marne in 1964, Hitchcock used his power to blacklist her throughout Hollywood. She couldn't get work anywhere. The studio system protected him because his films were enormously profitable. His obsession with Grace Kelly was well documented, and Kim Novak later described uncomfortable situations during the filming of Vertigo. The pattern was consistent. Hitchcock would become obsessed with an actress, music, create elaborate scenarios to isolate and control her, and become vengeful when rejected. Actors who worked with him described him as cold and manipulative. His daughter defended him after his death, but multiple actresses confirmed the pattern of behavior. The question his legacy now faces is difficult. Music. Can we separate the art from the artist when the artist used his art to abuse women? Hitchcock died in 1980 at age 80 from kidney failure. His films remain masterpieces of cinema, but his treatment of women reveals that genius doesn't excuse abuse. Number 3. Daryl Fev Zanuck. Daryl F. Zanuck co-founded 20th Century Fox and ran it from 1935 to 1971, producing over 400 films. He was one of the most powerful men in Hollywood history. He was also one of the most predatory. At Fox, everyone knew the rule. No woman got a major role without submitting to Zanuck's demands. His office door had an automatic lock, and everyone in the building understood what that meant. Multiple actresses later described being propositioned during what they thought were legitimate meetings about roles. Refusing Zanuck meant career suicide at Fox. His affairs with contract players were open secrets throughout Hollywood. Bella Darby's career and life were both destroyed by her relationship with him. He installed actresses in apartments as mistresses while remaining married, using studio resources to control and surveil the women he was involved with. The system was brutally simple. He would promise roles to actresses, begin affairs with them, and then renege on the promises when the affairs ended. Other executives followed his lead, creating a toxic culture throughout Fox. His treatment of Jean Tierney during her mental breakdown was particularly cruel, as he showed no concern for her well-being when she could no longer be useful to him professionally or sexually. Zanuck continued his predatory behavior well into his 70s. His autobiography, published late in life, whitewashed decades of abuse, presenting himself as a devoted family man and artistic visionary. Industry insiders knew the truth, but no one spoke publicly until much later. The extent of harassment and abuse at Fox under his leadership may never be fully known, as many victims took their stories to the grave. Zanuck died in 1979 at age 77 from jaw cancer. He built one of Hollywood's greatest studios on a foundation of systematic sexual exploitation, creating a culture where women understood that their bodies were the price of their careers. Number 2. Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin was one of cinema's pioneers, a genius who created the iconic character and revolutionized film comedy. He was also a man with a deeply disturbing pattern. He pursued teenage girls throughout his entire career, marrying them when scandal threatened or when they became pregnant. His first wife, Mildred Harris, was 16 years old when Chaplin, then 29, got her pregnant. His second wife, Leda Gray, was 15 when their relationship began. She gave birth at 16 to Chaplin's child. He was 35. When she became pregnant the first time, he forced her to have an abortion. When she became pregnant again, he married her to avoid prosecution. Their eventual divorce papers detail sexual abuse and manipulation that was shocking even by the standards of 1920s Hollywood. His third wife, Pet Goddard, was 21 when they married, but he had known her since she was much younger. His fourth wife, Una O'Neill, was 18 when they married. Chaplin was 54. They remained married until his death, but the pattern was unmistakable. Chaplin was attracted to teenage girls, and he used his fame and power to pursue them. Throughout his career, multiple paternity suits were filed by other young women. The FBI investigated him for Mann Act violations, which involved transporting minors across state lines for sexual purposes. His preference for teenagers was open knowledge in Hollywood, whispered about, but rarely confronted. When scandal threatened, Chaplin would simply marry the girl to avoid prosecution, then move on to the next teenager when that marriage failed. His exile from the United States in 1952 was officially about his political views, but the moral scandals surrounding his relationships with underage girls played a significant role. Chaplin died in 1977 at age 88 in Switzerland, never having returned to America. Modern biographers struggle with how to handle his legacy. His films are undeniable masterpieces that influence generations of filmmakers. But his serial pursuit of teenage girls, his pattern of impregnating minors and forcing abortions or hasty marriages, makes him a figure increasingly difficult to celebrate without acknowledging the darkness at the center of his personal life. Number 1. Elia Kazan. Elia Kazan was one of Hollywood's most brilliant directors. He made classics like On the Waterfront in 1954, A Streetcar Named Desire in 1951, and East of Eden in 1955. He was also the man who destroyed dozens of careers to save his own, making him perhaps the most hated figure in Hollywood history. Kazan had been a member of the Communist Party from 1934 to 1936, a brief period during the Depression when many intellectuals and artists joined leftist organizations. When the House Un-American Activities Committee began investigating Hollywood in the 1950s, Kazan was called to testify. Many others in his position took the Fifth Amendment or refused to name names. Kazan cooperated fully. In 1952, he named 8 people as former Communist Party members. Those he named were blacklisted. They couldn't work in Hollywood. Their careers were destroyed. Writers, actors, and directors found themselves unemployable overnight because Kazan had given their names to a committee conducting what many saw as a witch hunt. He did it to protect his own career and continue working. What made Kazan's betrayal particularly galling to many was what came next. He made On the Waterfront, a film about a dock worker who testifies against a corrupt union. The film's message about the moral rightness of informing was a deliberate parallel to his own testimony. He was using his art to justify his betrayal. The film won 8 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director for Kazan. Most HATED, one of the actors blacklisted because of testimony from other informers, confronted Kazan years later. The encounters were painful in public, but the ultimate reckoning came in 1999 when Kazan was given an honorary Oscar for Lifetime Achievement. As he walked to the stage, dozens of audience members refused to applaud. Nick Nolte, Ed Harris, and Amy Madigan were visibly sitting on their hands, while others gave a standing ovation. The split in that audience reflected a split that had existed in Hollywood for nearly 50 years. Kazan's defenders argued he was protecting his family and his career, that he was caught in an impossible situation, that the people he named were already known to the committee. His victims never worked again. Some died in poverty, some never recovered from having their careers destroyed. Kazan never truly apologized. He offered justifications and explanations, but never a genuine acknowledgement that what he did was wrong. He remained defensive about his decision until his death in 2003 at age 94 from natural causes. The debate over his legacy continues. His case became the defining example of the moral question facing anyone caught between self-preservation and loyalty to colleagues. Was he a practical survivor making a difficult choice, or a moral coward who sold out his friends to save himself? What's undeniable is the lasting damage, the lives he destroyed, the careers that ended, the families that suffered, the trust that was broken. Kazan's artistic genius is beyond question. His films are masterpieces that continue to be studied and celebrated. But his testimony before Hawk destroyed lives and divided Hollywood for generations, making him the ultimate example of talent without character, of brilliance without courage, of a man who chose his own success over the lives of others. So there you have it, the 12 most hated figures in Hollywood's golden age. These weren't just difficult personalities or demanding artists. They were individuals who used their power to abuse, exploit, manipulate, and destroy. Some were predators who targeted the vulnerable. Others were cowards who betrayed colleagues to save themselves. What separates them from merely difficult personalities is the lasting damage they inflicted. Careers ended, lives destroyed, trauma that echoed through generations. Which one surprised you most? Do you think Kazan belongs at number 1? Or was someone else worse? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this deep dive into Hollywood's dark side compelling, don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold stories from cinema's golden age. Thanks for watching.